I'm Scotty. I'm a practicing witch and a professional tarot nerd, and I'm glad you're here. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about offerings and sacrifices. Ooh, that word sacrifice. It's got some baggage to it, doesn't it? Well, let's talk about words briefly. The word sacrifice comes to us originally from Latin with the meaning to make sacred. And it was a thing that somebody did when giving something to a deity as part of a ceremonial or religious rite. These days, though, at least for me, that word conjures something a bit more, well, bloody. And we owe popular media for that one, and not just modern media either. Now, I'm not saying that such sacrifices never happened or don't happen, but the depictions of some evil priest guy with a big old knife standing over some poor hapless victim isn't really what's going on. There is evidence from archaeology that at least once in a while a human was killed as part of a religious rite, but the archaeological record isn't littered with such things, which leads me to believe that the practice was not as frequent an occurrence as we might think. Animal sacrifice was, and in some faiths, is still practiced. In the practices that I know anything about, these animals, after the religious bit, were provided to the community for consumption. Once the gods are done with it, after all, there's no sense in wasting the leftovers. All that being said, all the witches I know don't practice any kind of sacrifice of living animal beings. We have found other ways. Now, I don't want to imply that those faith paths that still conduct animal sacrifices are wrong in what they do. All I'm really saying is that their way isn't my way. Okay, so that seems a bit of a digression. So let's get back on track. Sacrifice means to make sacred. So what's an offering then? Well, the word offering comes to us from Middle English and means pretty much the same thing as sacrifice. Now, if we go back a little bit further, offering has roots in Latin meaning to present. There's one more word I'd like to mention. Votive. A votive offering, from the roots of its meaning, is an offering or sacrifice made to fulfill a vow. It's a thing one does as an obligation or fulfillment of a promise. And we'll be swinging back around to this one in a little bit. When it comes to sacrifice and offering, I see these as having a less fuzzy distinction than the etymology might imply. To me, an offering is anything we give to a spirit being as part of a ceremony or observance. In this case, by spirit being, I mean anyone or anything which has primary existence in non-physical reality. This includes deities, ancestors, spirits, spirit guides, angels, demons, even the flying spaghetti monster. Anywho, an offering is something we give. A sacrifice is also something we give, but there's something about it which is a bit more, well, sacrificial. Maybe an example is in order here. I like coffee. A lot. Maybe I have a shrine to Caffeina, the goddess of the holy bean. I share a little of my morning brew with Caffeina. That's an offering. But let's say I've been visited by the terrible demon insomnia, and I feel that I need a greater blessing from the most holy bean. In that case, I might give to Caffeina some of the holy beans themselves, unground and never to be used to brew the holy elixir. Now that's a sacrifice. All right, so this is really a rather silly example, but hopefully it illustrates my point. All sacrifices are offerings, but not all offerings are sacrifices. So why would we make offerings at all? Well, there are a few different reasons, and of course there are. Our reasons might be relational, venerative, worship, transactional, or votive. Whoa, with a lot of words out of context. I was in a store the other day and I saw this fuzzy little fox, this Yule ornament. He was on clearance. Now, I have a dear friend who really digs foxes, and this little guy reminded me of her. So I bought the little guy as a gift for my friend. That was a relational offering, a little prezi for my friend. Veneration and worship are sometimes used interchangeably, but they don't mean the same things to me. Veneration, as I see it, is a recognition of greatness and a sign of respect. Greatness in wisdom, kindness, skill, or in some other thing that we consider to be generally cool. It's a feeling, as I see it, which comes out of respect. Worship, on the other hand, as I see it, comes out of fear. A kind of, I'm going to worship you so you don't squish me kind of thing. Now, your mileage may vary, and you might have a different relationship with these words. And maybe my distinction says a little something about me. Some folks might not like to think about offerings as part of a transaction, but sometimes they are. I have a pickup truck, and like many folks who have a pickup truck, I'm occasionally asked to help somebody move. Now, if you're my really good friend, I'll happily help you move your furniture. Moving bodies is a whole different thing. If I know you a little bit and you're a decent enough person, I'll help you move your furniture, but I might ask for some gas money. And if I've never met you before and you walk up to me on the street and ask me to help you move, I might be willing to do that if you paid me enough. It's all transactional. If we have a strong relationship with a spirit being and we ask them for a favor, then they might do it because we're buddies. If we don't have an established relationship, but more of a passing acquaintance, then the said spirit might need a little gas money, so to speak. And if we've never ever even said hi to a spirit being, they might need a little bit more compensation for their time and effort, if they're willing to help us out at all. I realize that there's plenty of overlap in how I view this, and that's kind of the point. When we decide to leave an offering, we need to be thinking about the why part. Sure, sometimes offerings are performative. They're a part of something we just do. But I think if we're not thinking about the why part, then we might as well just be making toast. It's just an action without feeling. Unless, of course, you really like making toast and it kind of gives you a thrill. And in that case, all that's between you and your bread. So we've decided to make an offering. Where exactly do we do that? Today, I'm not going to get into altars and shrines and the like. That sounds like a good topic for a whole video. But what I will say is that shrines and altars are places where offerings are often left, made, or, well, offered. Often, but not always. On my personal altar, I have little containers and dishes for offerings, and this is not an uncommon practice. But we can also leave offerings in nature as well. I have a collection of dirt and water. That's not as weird as it might sound. Okay, maybe it is as weird as it sounds, but my collection of dirt and water, and by the way, it's really two collections, because if they were mixed together, that'd be a collection of mud now, wouldn't it? Anyway, these collections are samples taken from places special to me, and I will use these in my magical work. I also have some on my altar as elemental representations. And I got some jars. You know, it's really true that witches love jars. Well, I have some jars with some plant stuff in them, which I have harvested from around my house. Now, what's all this got to do with offerings? Well, I leave an offering for the spirits of that place whenever I acquire something. It seems only fair. After all, I'd be a little miffed if some weirdo came into my house and just started taking stuff because they thought it was cool. So I pay for the stuff in my collection with a little offering. Usually it's some little something which is biodegradable, like cornmeal or flour, but sometimes, depending on the nature of the place, I might leave a nice shiny coin. And sometimes I leave something a little more personal, a drop of blood. Using blood in magic is a whole topic, but in this case, I figure if I'm taking part of a plant, part of its body, then it seems fitting that I leave a part of my body in return. Now, I don't do this all the time, but in cases when I do, I'm wanting to have a closer connection to the spirit of that whatever it is. And if you choose to do this yourself, be sure that you really want to create that connection. And I suppose I should mention that it's important to be respectful when taking anything from nature. Be respectful of the place. Before I harvest anything, I introduce myself to the place or the plant or the stream or whatever. And then I ask permission. If I get the slightest hint that the answer is no, well, then I say thank you and I move on. Oh, and we should probably be mindful of property, too. Your neighbor might not appreciate you harvesting their front yard. And some places, like national parks, are protected by law. So back to offerings in nature. We have archaeological evidence of offerings in some places. In some cases, the offerings left had been destroyed in some way, in essence, sacrificing their mundane use. Bent swords have been found in bogs around Europe. Now, I wonder if these weapons were a part of some ceremony conducted elsewhere and then later tossed into the bog. Let's say you use a doohickey in a ceremony and you want to dispose of it, but you don't want some random stranger to get a hold of it later, so you mess it up and you toss it someplace that's not likely to be disturbed. I have weird thoughts sometimes. So what kinds of things can be an offering? Well, swords, it seems, can be offerings. And I've mentioned cornmeal, flour, and coins. Do you have a relationship with a spirit being that likes crows? Well, you could leave out some unsalted roasted peanuts for the crows in your yard. Are you a poet? Well, you could place a little poem you've written about something relevant on your altar. I've done this, and when I did, I didn't share it with anybody else. After all, I wrote it as a gift for someone. But that being said, if you write a poem about how cool the woods behind your house are, then sharing that sentiment with others might be seen as an extension of that offering. The what do we make as offerings question might depend on your spiritual tradition or on the spirit being you're leaving the offering for, or both. People like different things, after all, and I think that's true of spirit beings too. Do some reading and some research and ask. Sometimes as our relationship grows, a spirit being might suggest something that you won't find in your books. In general, though, some things which might be used as offerings are incense, candles, water or other liquids, fruit, flowers, food items, money, symbolic items, even charitable donations to a good cause. Doing some research and soul searching can help you discover what works best for you and the situation at hand. Feel the need to leave an offering and just don't seem to have anything appropriate? A little offering of your own energy might fit the bill. Picking up litter someplace is an offering of time and energy which we can make to the spirits of that place. A sincere thank you can be an energetic offering. Have a relationship with a spirit being that likes dogs? A donation of time or money to a reputable dog rescue might be an appropriate offering. So we're leaving an offering for a spirit being, whether it be for veneration or as part of an agreement. Well, what do they get out of the whole deal? After all, these beings don't seem to have a need for physical things. If I leave coffee for the most holy Caffeina, she's not really going to drink it, is she? Well, maybe she is, in an energetic sense. Lots of different faith traditions consider that the spirit being honored does eat the offering. They just take of the energetic essence of the stuff and leave the physical matter behind. So that might be one thing they get out of the deal. But another thing is the energy of our intent as well, and the connection to the physical universe. Okay, so why would anybody cool enough to be called a spirit being want anything to do with this dumpster fire of a physical universe? Well, in spite of all the bad we might encounter, there really are lots of nifty and beautiful things in our universe. When I teach classes, I sometimes feel like I've learned more from the act of teaching and from my students than maybe I've taught. In fact, this whole video channel thing is an extension of that. Preparing for these videos, just like when I prepare for a workshop, it forces me to learn, relearn, think, and rethink things. And when I'm in front of students, I feel invigorated. There's an energetic exchange. I think it's quite possible that a relationship with spirit beings can give them an energetic boost as well. So we've made our offering. And do we leave it there forever? Well, it depends. If we leave some cornmeal someplace in nature, then yes, we leave it there. As time goes, it'll be taken back into the earth. What about stuff on our personal altars or shrines? Do we leave the poem we wrote on there forever? Well, we can if that feels appropriate, but over time, offerings can start to pile up. And if that offering happens to be a piece of fruit, we should probably dispose of it before it starts to draw flies. Unless those particular flies are the flies you were wanting to draw. But something like that is between you and your flies. When I leave a piece of fruit or something else that will spoil, I do remove the item and I take it to the edge of my yard and I toss it out into the woods. But what about stuff we really don't want just laying around in the woods? Okay, so let's say we've left a piece of chocolate cake as an offering for the most holy Caffeina. She does love her chocolate after all. But we can't just toss a piece of chocolate cake out in the woods, can we? Chocolate's not good for wildlife. Well, we could bury it in our yard, I suppose, but I don't know if worms like chocolate, and I don't want to give them little tiny tummy aches. And something like chocolate cake, it won't really burn up. So what's a poor confused witch to do? Let's think about that another way. Let's say our friend brought us a piece of chocolate cake. Why? Well, because they're our friend, and they know we love some chocolate cake. So we eat the lovely chocolate cake, and when we're done, there are crumbs there on the plate. But we don't worry about that, right? Because we're going to scrape the crumbs into the trash or just put the plate in the dishwasher. And away go the crumbs to Crumb Holla. Is our friend upset that the crumbs went into the trash or down the dishwasher drain? Not at all, because we've enjoyed that lovely piece of chocolate cake. Or maybe it's a really, really rich piece of chocolate cake and we just can't eat the whole thing. Would our friend be upset with us if we shared the cake with somebody? Surely not. So let's look at this from the energetic perspective of Caffeina. Holy Caffeina will take the chocolate cake energy from our offering, and once she's had her fill, all that's left are the crumbs. Now to us, those crumbs will still look like a piece of chocolate cake sitting there on the plate. Now I feel like at this point it's okay to slide that cake into the trash. It's only crumbs, metaphorically speaking, after all. But I also think it's okay after Caffeina is done with it to share what's left, to eat the leftovers. Now this covers the disposition of the offering, but do we just unceremoniously take that offering from the altar or shrine and just toss it? I don't think so. I think it's polite to ask, are you done with your plate? Or something along those lines before we pull things. We're building relationships after all. And once we get the nod, then it's okay to remove something. After all, we wouldn't like it if somebody came along and just picked up our plate of chocolate cake that we were enjoying without asking us first, especially if we weren't done enjoying it. And I feel like all this applies to durable stuff too, kinda. Let's say we've left a little coffee cup as an offering for Caffeina. She might be okay with us using that ourselves once she's done with it, but I don't think we'd want to re-gift it as another offering. That might seem a little rude. And if we're talking about energies here, then the coffee cup might be a bit, well, energetically empty at this point. We might have a place to bury things in the yard. We could put it there. And now I'm imagining some future archaeologist excavating my own backyard. What if you live in an apartment and really don't have a yard or woods out back? What then? Well, the old trash can might be your only option. After all, what happens to most of our trash? It's either buried or incinerated. Sure, we want to reduce our waste and reuse and recycle when we can, but the occasional little coffee cup should be just fine. And what about sharing that coffee cup with someone through donation to a charity? Would that be okay? Well, it depends. It depends on your tradition and beliefs and your relationship with the spirit being in question. I don't think Caffeina would mind. Offerings can be an important and fulfilling part of any spiritual path. There are lots of different ways of going about the practice. Not only can they be important in building relationships with spirit beings, they can also help us understand ourselves better as well. After all, we're spirits too. Thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today. If you've enjoyed that time, please like, subscribe, share, comment. I'm Skaji.